Welcome, dear viewers, to a mesmerizing journey back in time, an era of colossal temples, epic battles, and timeless glory. Today, you are invited to witness the reign of one of ancient Egypt's greatest rulers, Pharaoh Ramses II. Known as Ramses the Great, he wasn't just a king. He was a living god to his people, a fearless warrior, a master builder, and a legend whose legacy echoes through the sands of time. Across this captivating video series, we will uncover the rise of a pharaoh who reigned for over 6 decades, reshaped Egypt's landscape with monuments of astonishing grandeur, and secured peace through diplomacy as much as through might. You'll meet queens and generals, priests and scribes, and walk the golden halls of power in Thebes and Pi Ramesses. So sit back, relax, and allow your imagination to drift across the Nile. This isn't just history. It's a saga of ambition, love, war, politics, and divine legacy. Whether you're a lifelong history lover or just curious about the world's ancient wonders, you're in for an unforgettable experience. Let's begin the tale of Ramses the Great, the eternal pharaoh in the golden city of Thebes. Beneath the watchful eyes of the gods, a child was born who would one day become one of Egypt's most powerful rulers. Ramses was the son of Pharaoh Seti I and Queen Tuya, born into an empire already thriving but hungry for greater glory. From an early age, Ramses was treated not merely as a prince, but as a divine gift to the people. He was schooled in warfare, diplomacy, architecture, and the sacred rituals of the gods. The boy quickly showed a remarkable talent for leadership. His piercing gaze, fiery spirit, and insatiable curiosity marked him as someone destined for greatness. At just 6, his father named him Prince Regent, sharing the throne with him in preparation for one day ruling alone. Egypt's court priests whispered of ancient omens foretelling his rise, and scribes began carving his name into the great record halls. This was no ordinary heir. Ramses would soon shape the world around him, bending the desert to his will and writing his name across time itself. But for now, he was a boy with a destiny, standing in the long shadow of gods and kings. At just 3 years of age, Ramses stood before the massive pillars of Karnak temple, clad in ceremonial gold and the blue crown of war. The people of Egypt gathered in awe to witness the boy prince's elevation as company regent, a rare honor marking the beginning of his official rule beside his father, Seti I. Trumpets sounded, incense clouds rose to the heavens, and the sacred words of coronation echoed through the ancient halls. Seti I, already a respected leader, had recognized the brilliance and ambition in his son. Involving Ramses in matters of state was not just preparation, it was strategic. The empire needed continuity, and Ramses was ready to lead. Together, father and son inspected troops, issued laws, and commissioned new construction projects. As company regent, Ramses began to cultivate his image as a divine ruler. Statues were erected depicting him with gods, and inscriptions named him beloved of Amun. The boy was becoming more than a man. He was becoming a symbol of Egypt's eternal strength. The seeds of a glorious reign were planted in these early years, nurtured by a father's trust, a people's hope, and a prince's boundless will. As company regent, Ramses was no idle figurehead. By Shiloh, he led military campaigns into Canaan and Nubia, commanding chariots with a warrior's resolve. His enemies knew his name, and his soldiers followed him with fiery loyalty. His bold tactics earned him victories and admiration. This young general was no mere prince, but a storm upon the battlefield. Ramses' campaigns were as much about image as they were conquest. His victories were recorded in lavish temple reliefs, where he was shown defeating hordes single-handedly. Whether exaggerated or not, these depictions helped build the legend. Ramses began to adopt titles like the Strong Bull and Subduer of Foreign Lands. Back in Egypt, the common people whispered tales of his heroism. Statues of the young warrior were erected across cities, his name etched into stone beside those of gods. And yet, despite his growing power, Ramses remained a loyal son, always returning to Thebes to confer with Seti I. The rise of Ramses as a military icon solidified his place in Egyptian hearts. His journey from boy prince to divine general had begun. The mighty Seti I passed away after a long and honorable reign. The entire empire mourned, temples echoed with chants, and offerings were made to guide his soul to the afterlife. At just under 6 years old, Ramses was now the sole ruler of Egypt. Though the loss of his father weighed heavily on him, Ramses rose to the throne with purpose. His coronation was held in Thebes under the eyes of the gods. Wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, he vowed to outshine even the greatest of his ancestors. His first acts as pharaoh were both symbolic and strategic. He began plans for a new capital, Pi Ramesses, in the Nile Delta. He expanded military presence across the empire, tightened alliances, and called for the construction of vast temples and statues to honor the gods and himself. But Ramses also visited his father's tomb in the Valley of the Kings, swearing at its gates that he would bring Egypt to a golden age. In Seti's name, with heart, mind, and sword, Ramses would rule, and the world would remember with the might of Egypt behind him. Ramses II envisioned a city unlike any before. Pi Ramesses, the House of Ramses, situated in the Nile Delta. This new capital would rival Thebes in grandeur and serve as the heart of his empire. Construction began with furious speed. Skilled workers, stonecutters, and foreign captives toiled day and night. Massive temples, royal palaces, ceremonial lakes, and armories rose from the fertile soil. Pi Ramesses wasn't just a city, it was a message to the world. Egypt was eternal, and Ramses was its divine ruler. At its peak, the city glittered with gold and turquoise tiles. Streets bustled with diplomats, merchants, and priests. Ramses held court here, receiving tribute and dispensing justice. He even built a massive stable for overwubad horses. Pi Ramesses was both a jewel and a fortress. The city was infused with symbolism. Every column and relief told tales of Ramses's victories and divine favor. Even the river was redirected to flow closer to his palace, as if nature itself bowed to the pharaoh. Pi Ramesses was not just a home. It was a throne carved into the land. Among the many women in Pharaoh Ramses II's life, one stood above the rest, not just as a consort, but as a queen, a diplomat, and a goddess in the eyes of the people. Her name was Nefertari, and her beauty and wisdom became the subject of poetry carved in stone. Ramses adored her deeply. He called her she for whom the sun shines and commissioned a breathtaking temple at Abu Simbel in her honor, an almost unheard-of tribute in Egyptian tradition. She appeared beside him in battle scenes and religious rituals, a symbol of both political partnership and divine femininity. Nefertari wasn't just a figure of elegance. She played a vital role in diplomacy. When Ramses entered peace negotiations with rival empires, her presence helped seal the trust and friendship between kings. She was literate, educated, and politically astute, often communicating with foreign queens in correspondence that helped preserve the kingdom's prosperity. Though Ramses had many wives and children, Nefertari held a unique place in his heart. Her tomb in the Valley of the Queens is one of the most beautiful ever discovered, its vibrant paintings still whispering tales of their bond. In loving her, Ramses revealed a softer, human side, one that balanced his image as a warrior and god. Their union remains one of the most iconic royal romances in history. Ethendurn Scepter. One of the defining legacies of Ramses II was his architectural ambition. He didn't merely build temples, he built monuments of awe, designed to echo his name for eternity. These temples were not just places of worship, they were propaganda in stone, proclaiming his divine rule and military might. Foremost among them was the magnificent Ramesseum in Thebes, a mortuary temple dedicated to the gods and to Ramses himself. Towering pylons, massive statues, and sprawling courtyards stretched across the landscape like footprints of a giant. Inscriptions celebrated his victories, especially the Battle of Kadesh, in poetic hieroglyphs. Further south, near the border of Nubia, he constructed the rock-cut temples of Abu Simbel. The colossal seated figures of Ramses at its entrance remain some of the most iconic in all of ancient Egypt. The smaller temple beside it, dedicated to Queen Nefertari, was a symbol of balance between power and love. These temples served not only spiritual purposes, but also political ones. They reminded Egypt's subjects and its enemies that Ramses was not merely a man, but a god among mortals. By building on a scale that dwarfed all predecessors, Ramses shaped not just the skyline of Egypt, but the memory of an entire civilization. Tensions between Egypt and the Hittite Empire simmered for years. Both powers eyed the strategic city of Kadesh in modern-day Syria, a key stronghold along vital trade routes. Determined to assert dominance, Ramses II led a massive campaign northward with 4 divisions, Amun, Ra, Ptah, and Set. As he marched toward Kadesh, Ramses believed he had the upper hand. Hittite spies, however, deceived him, leading him to think the enemy was far away. In reality, Muwatalli II, king of the Hittites, had assembled a massive force nearby, hidden beyond the city walls. Ramses, isolated from his main army with only the Amun division nearby, found himself surrounded. It was a masterstroke of Hittite strategy and a moment of crisis for Egypt's young pharaoh. Ambushed and outnumbered, many would have fled or surrendered, but Ramses refused to yield. In the final hours before the confrontation, he gathered his men, rallied their spirits, and prepared for a battle that would echo through history. What unfolded at Kadesh would become one of the most vividly recorded battles of the ancient world. A chaotic, brutal conflict that tested the courage and cunning of Ramses the Great. The morning broke over Kadesh with a roar of thunder. War had begun. Ramses II, caught off guard by the Hittite ambush, mounted his chariot and charged into battle with unmatched fury. With only the Amun division by his side, he confronted the Hittite onslaught head-on. The clash was brutal. Dust choked the air as thousands of chariots collided, their wheels spinning through blood-soaked sand. Ramses fought like a lion, driving his golden chariot directly into enemy ranks. He cut down foes with his bow and sword, calling upon the gods to protect him. His bravery inspired his soldiers to stand firm. Meanwhile, the delayed Ra division finally arrived, turning the tide. The Egyptian forces, fueled by their pharaoh's courage, rallied and pushed the Hittites back. Muwatalli II's army retreated to Kadesh, and though the city was not taken, Ramses declared the battle a triumph. The Battle of Kadesh was a draw militarily, but a massive victory in propaganda. Ramses' scribes turned the event into legend, portraying him as a lone hero who defeated thousands. His temple walls immortalized his bravery, an epic of strength, resilience, and divine favor. Kadesh cemented Ramses' legacy as a warrior pharaoh. Years after the Battle of Kadesh, Ramses II and Mu'tali's successor, Hattusili III, recognized the futility of endless war. With both empires facing internal threats and border instability, they made an unprecedented move in ancient diplomacy. They forged peace. In the Ursa-Escent year of Ramses's reign, the two great powers signed the first known written peace treaty in history. Written in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Akkadian cuneiform, the treaty promised eternal friendship, mutual protection, and aid against internal revolts. Envoys traveled between capitals, exchanging gifts and oaths. Ramses married a Hittite princess, sealing the alliance in both ink and bloodline. Temples celebrated the treaty as divinely ordained, with scenes of harmony replacing war murals. This diplomatic triumph strengthened Ramses' image as not only a warrior, but a wise and just ruler. He had brought Egypt not only victory, but peace. For decades to come, Egypt and the Hittites maintained their fragile but historic alliance. The treaty's original text still survives on tablets in modern-day Turkey and Egypt, a testament to Ramses's enduring legacy as a peacemaker. Pharaoh Ramses II fathered over Ebet children during his long life, sons and daughters born of royal wives and concubines. These children were not just offspring of a king, they were symbols of dynastic power and continuity. Their names adorned temples and tombs, their images carved alongside their fathers on monuments across Egypt. Ramses took pride in his vast family. He honored his sons with military and priestly ranks, training them to command armies and serve the gods. His eldest son, Amun-Herkhepishef, was groomed to be his successor and often appeared beside him in ceremonies. Daughters, too, were highly regarded. Many bore titles like Singer of the God and served in religious temples. He built a special section in the Ramesseum dedicated to his children, and their names were inscribed in long procession, an eternal family portrait carved in stone. During festivals, they paraded through the streets dressed in silks and gold, riding behind the pharaoh in ceremonial processions. Yet even in this golden house, there was sorrow. Some children died young, others perished in war. Ramses outlived many of them, and their tombs stand as silent tributes to his personal losses amid his public triumphs. Still, through them, the legacy of Ramses was multiplied, a dynasty carved in flesh and memory. As Ramses II's reign extended into decades, he revived one of the oldest and most sacred traditions of pharaonic Egypt. The Sed festival, traditionally celebrated after censored years on the throne, it was a symbolic renewal of the king's divine vitality and authority. The festival was a spectacular blend of ritual and pageantry. Held in Thebes and later in Pi Ramesses, it featured multiple days of processions, athletic displays, and religious ceremonies. Ramses, now an aging monarch, ran ceremonial laps around a sacred court, symbolizing his continued strength and worthiness to rule. Temples were adorned with special reliefs, showing the pharaoh rejuvenated by divine power. Priests presented offerings to gods like Osiris, Amun, and Ma'at, while dancers and musicians filled the air with celebration. The people of Egypt rejoiced, for the Sed festival also meant prosperity and favor from the gods. Ramses did not stop with one Sed festival. He celebrated multiple throughout his reign, asserting not only his vitality, but his near immortality. With each celebration, his image as a living god became more fixed in the public mind. The Sed festivals were not just religious acts. They were declarations that Ramses II, even in old age, was eternal. Ramses II was not only a warrior king, but a master of diplomacy. Beyond Egypt and the Hittites, he expanded Egypt's influence by engaging with kingdoms across the ancient Near East. His court welcomed envoys from Babylonia, Assyria, and Mitanni, bringing rare treasures, exotic animals, and messages of alliance. Foreign rulers admired Ramses for his power and stability. Some addressed him as a brother, others as a divine equal. Letters carved into clay tablets, later found in Amarna and Hattusa, show warm exchanges of gifts, marriage negotiations, and mutual respect. To maintain these relations, Ramses married several foreign princesses. These royal brides brought culture, language, and influence with them, weaving Egypt into the broader web of ancient international politics. In return, Egypt sent grain, gold, and craftsmanship across borders, securing peace without the sword. This diplomacy enhanced Egypt's status as a superpower. It also showcased Ramses's ability to rule not just through force, but wisdom. He understood that an empire must endure through connections as well as conquest. Ramses' court became a melting pot of languages, dress, and ideas, proof of Egypt's wide reach. This was not just a king with borders. This was a pharaoh with a global vision. To the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh was not merely a ruler. He was a living god. Ramses II embraced this divine identity more fully than any before him. In temples, he was portrayed not only as king, but as the son of Ra, favored by Amun and chosen by Ma'at. His image was cast alongside the gods, sometimes indistinguishable from them. Ramses commissioned temples where he and the gods shared sanctuaries. So, at Abu Simbel, his colossal statues sit beside Horus and Ptah, each carved with equal reverence. In inscriptions, Ramses speaks as a deity, his words echoing with divine command. He even renamed cities and monuments to include his titles, ensuring the god's power was inseparable from his own. Daily rituals reinforced his divinity. At dawn, priests bathed and dressed statues of the gods, and in some temples, statues of Ramses himself. Hymns were sung to him. Offerings were made in his name. People prayed to him in times of drought, illness, or war, but it wasn't just vanity. It was strategy. By making himself divine, Ramses united his people through spiritual loyalty. He became a symbol of cosmic order and protection. In life, he ruled as a god. In death, he would ascend as one. Even in life, Ramses II planned carefully for his death. Deep within the Valley of the Kings, a massive tomb was carved from stone. KVC, the eternal resting place of the living God. The tomb was a reflection of his power, devotion, and desire for immortality. Its walls were etched with passages from the Book of the Dead, filled with spells to guide Ramses through the afterlife. Ceiling constellations lit the pharaoh's path among the stars, while painted scenes depicted his journey through Duat, the underworld. Every corridor was lined with golden imagery, Ramses greeting Osiris, defeating chaos, and merging with the sun god Ra. The scale of the tomb was immense, rivaling that of any predecessor. Dozens of artisans labored for decades, chiseling and painting with precision. Hidden chambers held treasures, ritual objects, and sacred statues, all meant to accompany the king beyond death. Ramses' coffin was constructed of red granite and inlaid with gold, a bed fit for a god, though his mummy would be moved centuries later. The tomb remained a symbol of his eternal reign. To Ramses, death was not an end, but a transformation, and through his tomb, he would rise each day with the sun, for all eternity. Hidden behind the grand courts and public temples of Ramses' palaces was a world seldom seen, his royal harem. This palace within a palace was a well-guarded compound, home to dozens of wives, concubines, and their children. Far from the romanticized image, the harem was both a place of privilege and politics. Staffed by tutors, midwives, guards, and eunuchs, the harem was highly organized. Each wife or concubine had rank and role. While Queen Nefertari held precedence, other royal women played essential roles in bearing and raising future leaders, as well as serving in rivalries often brewed quietly within these walls, especially over succession and favor. Education in the harem was rigorous. Sons of Ramses studied statecraft, religion, and combat, while daughters learned music, dance, and divine rites. It was a place of refinement, power, and isolation. Some royal women were even foreign princesses, brought in through diplomatic marriages, adding layers of culture and tension. The royal harem was more than a private sanctuary. It was a political incubator, shaping Egypt's next generation of rulers. And within its elegant gardens and silent chambers, history was quietly being forged. South of Egypt lay the rich and powerful lands of Nubia, home to skilled warriors and valuable gold mines. Early in his reign, Ramses II launched military campaigns to secure this vital region and protect Egypt's southern border. Nubian tribes had grown increasingly bold, threatening trade routes and settlements. Ramses responded swiftly, marching his forces deep into the land of Kush. His army, flanked by chariots and elite bowmen, swept across Nubia, capturing rebellious fortresses and re-establishing Egyptian dominance. But Ramses was not only a conqueror, he was a builder. Following his victories, he established temples and administrative centers throughout Nubia, ensuring loyalty through presence and propaganda. At places like Beit el-Wali and Gurf Hussein, he left rock-cut temples covered in imagery of himself smiting enemies and offering gifts to Amun. He also encouraged intermarriage, education, and the appointment of Nubian elites to local positions. The goal was clear: assimilation through reverence and control. His policy ensured peace in the region for generations. Through these campaigns, Ramses expanded Egypt's economic reach and demonstrated his power abroad. The gold of Nubia filled Egyptian treasuries, and the gods of Egypt were now worshipped far beyond the First Cataract. Each year, the ancient city of Thebes hosted one of Egypt's most spectacular religious celebrations, the Festival of Opet. During Ramses II's reign, the festival grew larger than ever before, cementing his role as both king and divine intermediary. The celebration honored Amun, the chief deity of Thebes. The sacred procession began at Karnak Temple, where priests carried the god's statue in a gilded bark, accompanied by musicians, dancers, and massive crowds. The journey moved slowly down the Avenue of Sphinxes to Luxor Temple, symbolizing Amun's visit to rejuvenate the pharaoh's kingship. Ramses himself walked in the procession, dressed in ceremonial robes, swinging incense and chanting prayers. He paused to receive blessings, and the crowd roared his name as divine music filled the air. Boats floated beside the riverbank, packed with celebrants, torches blazing, and drums echoing into the night. The Opet festival lasted days. It was both a religious ritual and a royal reaffirmation. By participating, Ramses reminded the people of his sacred right to rule and his connection to the gods. Temples overflowed with offerings, and even the poorest citizens were fed. Through Opet, Ramses II reminded Egypt, as long as the Nile flows and the sun rises, Pharaoh reigns. Justice in Egypt was due. Pharaoh was not just king. He was the ultimate judge, the living embodiment of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order. Ramses II embraced this sacred duty, making regular appearances in court to dispense law and ensure fairness across the land. in the grand halls of Pi Ramesses, citizens could petition the pharaoh directly. Disputes over land, inheritance, theft, and labor were brought before him or his appointed viziers. Ramses was known for being stern but wise, preferring mercy when it strengthened loyalty and harshness when it protected the realm. He reformed aspects of law enforcement by appointing officials loyal to the crown rather than to local elites. Records show that he ordered retrials when justice seemed poorly served and even punished corrupt judges. Temple inscriptions praised him as the bringer of truth, while officials carried out his verdicts in cities and provinces. His legal decrees were sent across Egypt, carved into stone, and read aloud in town squares. To the people, Ramses was more than a distant ruler. He was the protector of order, the anchor of their civilization. Under his rule, Ma'at flourished and law prevailed. In a time when marriage was diplomacy, Ramses II masterfully used royal unions to build peace and influence abroad. Among his many wives were several foreign princesses from the Hittite, Babylonian, and Syrian courts, each brought to Egypt as a symbol of alliance. These foreign brides entered Egypt with grandeur. Their entourages brought rare animals, spices, silks, and gifts that dazzled the Egyptian court. Upon arrival, they were instructed in Egyptian customs, religion, and language. Many converted to worship Egyptian gods, took Egyptian names, and bore children that blended bloodlines and cultures. One of the most famous was the Hittite princess Maythornafur, daughter of Hattusili III. Her marriage to Ramses marked the final seal on the Great Peace Treaty between Egypt and the Hittites. Temple walls and diplomatic letters described the wedding procession with gold-laden caravans and joyous celebration. These marriages helped ensure stability at Egypt's borders. They also elevated Ramses' international image as a unifier of kingdoms. Within his harem, these princesses held high status, and some became mothers of future commanders and priests. Through love and alliance, Ramses ruled not just Egypt, but hearts and thrones across the ancient world. Late in Ramses II's reign, a new and terrifying threat emerged from the west and north, the Sea Peoples. These mysterious warrior bands, likely a confederation of displaced tribes, swept across the Mediterranean, toppling cities and attacking coastlines. Their origins remain debated, but their power was undeniable. Egypt's trading partners in the Levant and Cyprus fell like dominoes. Reports of burning ports and fleeing refugees reached the court of Ramses. Though now older, the pharaoh responded with swift determination. He fortified Egypt's northern frontier, particularly along the Nile Delta, and rallied his generals to intercept the maritime invaders. The Sea Peoples were unlike previous foes. They came in waves of ships, armed with curved swords and round shields, fighting with desperation and fury. Ramses coordinated both land and naval defenses, building watchtowers and deploying archers along Egypt's beaches and river mouths. Clashes followed. Though the Sea Peoples could not penetrate deep into Egypt, they caused widespread disruption to trade and diplomatic networks. Ramses claimed victory, depicting himself defeating them in vivid temple reliefs. Though their full invasion would strike later dynasties harder, Ramses II's resistance delayed their tide and preserved Egypt's heartland. As Ramses aged, his divine image intensified. No longer just a ruler, he was viewed as a living god walking among mortals. His subjects believed the gods breathed through him, Ra's power in his eyes, Osiris's judgment in his hands. In temples and towns, people didn't just honor Ramses, they worshipped him. Temples now included sanctuaries, solely devoted to his spirit. Priests led hymns not only for Amun or Isis, but for Ramses himself. His statues stood beside traditional gods, Pilgrims traveled to Pi Ramesses to lay offerings at his feet and seek his blessing. Tales circulated that sick children recovered after touching his garments, and storms calmed at his prayers. Ramses carefully cultivated the. He appeared in ceremonies more often, his face aged but radiant with divine makeup and gold. He was depicted with halos of light in temple carvings and called "He who shines like the sun." His voice, slow but commanding, echoed like prophecy. This deification served more than vanity. It unified Egypt. Amid threats and changing alliances, a god-king gave the people security and hope. Whether or not they had met him, every Egyptian believed Ramses watched over them. And for Ramses, who had long shaped his legacy, this divine reverence was the final stone in his eternal pyramid. While temples and statues earned eternal fame, Ramses II also invested heavily in infrastructure. He was a pharaoh of the people, building cities, roads, reservoirs, and granaries to sustain the empire's growth. His reign saw economic expansion supported by a practical, logistical foundation. The Nile was tamed, act more effectively than ever before. Ramses ordered the widening of irrigation canals, creating farmland in previously arid zones. Grain silos were constructed throughout the delta to store surplus for hard seasons. Roads connected temple cities with outposts and markets, allowing smoother transport of goods and armies alike. In towns like Abydos, workers' villages were built with housing, baths, and workshops. These communities housed stonemasons, artists, and laborers with dignity, unlike in earlier eras where many toiled in isolation. The empire's heart beat in more than just Thebes or Pi Ramesses. It now stretched across hundreds of thriving microcosms. He also improved communication. Couriers carried messages on horseback between military outposts and royal cities, while scribes documented laws, taxes, and trade in meticulous detail. Ramses' vision wasn't just glory, it was function. Under his rule, Egypt worked like a machine, fueled by water, labor, and divine will. The land prospered not just through conquest, but through construction that touched every citizen's life. Among Ramses II's most iconic monuments are the rock-cut temples of Abu Simbel, nestled in the cliffs of Nubia. These twin temples were architectural marvels, one dedicated to Ramses himself and the other to his beloved queen Nefertari. But beyond their grandeur, they held a celestial secret. Each year, on 2 precise days, believed to be Ramses' birthday and coronation, the rising sun pierced the inner sanctuary of the great temple, before Polish, illuminating the statues of the gods, and Ramses seated among them. This was no accident, it was a feat of astronomical engineering, aligning ruler and cosmos. The temple's facade featured 4 colossal statues of Ramses, each over 6 feet tall. Inside, hallways were adorned with battle scenes, especially from Kadesh, showing the pharaoh's power in war and peace. The walls were a visual biography in stone. The smaller temple for Nefertari was equally remarkable. It showed her as Hathor, the goddess of love and music, a rare honor for a queen. She stood equal to Ramses in stature, an architectural declaration of affection and respect. Abu Simbel was a political and spiritual statement carved into earth and time. It declared Ramses' dominion over Nubia, mastery of the cosmos, and eternal love for Nefertari. And to this day, the sun still honors him. As Ramses II entered his bashurs, he remained the heart of Egypt. Though his steps slowed and his speeches became more measured, his mind remained sharp and his spirit unshaken. Few pharaohs had ruled so long. His reign now spanned 3 generations. His hair had turned white, his back bent with age, but the throne was still his. He was now revered as a living ancestor, a bridge between the mortal and divine. Children born decades after his early campaigns still grew up hearing tales of his triumphs at Kadesh and his love for Nefertari. Within the palace, Ramses continued to meet with advisors, approve temple plans, and hold ceremonial court. His eldest surviving son, Merneptah, took on many duties, but Ramses remained ever watchful. He had seen empires rise and fall and knew the importance of legacy. The tombs of his children multiplied. He outlived many sons, mourned queens, and buried friends. But his empire endured. Peace held, temples thrived, and the people still praised his name. He had conquered, built, ruled, and loved. As the twilight of his life approached, Ramses no longer sought conquest, only eternity. And he had already carved it, stone by stone, into the memory of the world, though Queen Nefertari had passed many years before Ramses' twilight. Her presence never faded. She remained immortal in his memory, carved into temples, sealed in scrolls, and painted in brilliant colors on the walls of her tomb. Among the countless queens in Egypt's long history, few held such lasting reverence. Her tomb in the Valley of the Queens, known today as Luxor Loop, is considered one of the most beautiful burial chambers ever discovered. Its walls glisten with mythological scenes, guiding her soul through the afterlife. She is depicted receiving gifts from the gods, walking alongside Isis, and standing proudly as a goddess herself. Even in old age, Ramses often mentioned her in inscriptions. He called her the great wife of the king, the one for whom the sun shines. In temple ceremonies, her statues continued to be honored beside his. Her memory served as a symbol of loyalty, love, and the divine feminine. Nefertari's influence extended beyond romance. She had played key roles in diplomacy, religion, and royal motherhood. Her daughters held sacred titles, and her image as an equal to Ramses challenged tradition in empowering ways. Through her, Egypt saw not only the strength of its pharaoh, but the grace of its queen. Her legacy, like Ramses, was eternal. At the age of Khoses, after an extraordinary reign of years, Ramses II passed from the world of the living. The land held its breath, temples fell silent, the Nile flowed, but Egypt felt still. A god-king was gone. His body was prepared with the utmost reverence. Priests of Anubis performed the sacred rites, carefully embalming him with rare resins and linen, placing amulets to protect his soul. His sarcophagus, carved of red granite, was sealed with spells from the Book of the Dead. A grand funeral procession led through the Valley of the Kings, ending in Tomb Chi, his eternal house. As the coffin descended, priests chanted, and incense filled the air. Pharaoh Ramses was now one with Osiris, ruler of the afterlife. Yet in many ways, Ramses never truly died. His monument stood across Egypt. His face, carved into stone, still watched over the Nile. His name echoed in papyrus scrolls, temple hymns, and legends whispered by grandfathers to grandchildren. Egypt had known kings before him, but none like Ramses the Great. His death marked the end of a golden age and the beginning of a legacy that would endure for thousands of years. Following the death of Ramses II, the mantle of power passed to his Jusanth son, Merneptah. At nearly Luxor years old, Merneptah had long stood in the shadow of his father. Yet he had been trained well, battle-hardened, wise in administration, and deeply rooted in religious tradition. Egypt faced new pressures. Libyan tribes began testing the western borders, and internal stability wavered after Ramses' long reign. Merneptah acted swiftly. He mobilized troops, repelled invasions, and re-established Egypt's might through decisive action. Inscriptions from his reign, most notably the famous Merneptah stele, record not only his victories, but the first known mention of Israel as a people. This stele, placed in a temple, reinforced Egypt's dominance even amid the shifting political currents of the ancient Near East. Though he lacked the charisma and grandeur of Ramses, Merneptah brought discipline and steadiness. He preserved the temples, honored his father's name, and ensured the continued prosperity of Pi Ramesses. He ruled for about a decade, leaving behind a more modest legacy, but an essential one. In an era that could have slipped into chaos, Merneptah kept Ma'at, the balance of order and justice, alive. And in doing so, he safeguarded the legend of Ramses for future generations. Millennia after Ramses II's death, his name and image lived on, but his body vanished from known history. Tomb robbers had ravaged the Valley of the Kings, and KV was no exception. For years, scholars feared that his mummy was lost forever. Then, in the Jujot century, a discovery changed everything. In a hidden royal cache at Deir el-Bahari, archaeologists uncovered dozens of mummies, carefully relocated by ancient priests during a time of grave looting. Among them was a tall, dignified figure wrapped in fine linens, his features surprisingly preserved. The name inscribed confirmed it, Ramses II. His face bore the lines of age, his jaw strong, his nose aquiline, a regal profile. Scientists were amazed at his size and condition. Ramses had stood nearly 11 feet tall, remarkable for his time. His body showed signs of arthritis, and his hair, still reddish, revealed clues about royal treatment. In Ichenju by Chichaloup, the mummy was flown to Paris for preservation. French authorities even issued him a passport, listing his occupation as king deceased. There, he received international honors before being returned to Egypt with ceremony and pride. Today, Ramses rests in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, a reminder that even in death, he commands the attention of the world. Today, Ramses II is more than a historical figure. He is a legend. Tourists walk beneath his statues. Historians study his reign. Artists and filmmakers recreate his battles and romances. His legacy stretches across Sanling years and still pulses through our collective imagination. From the temples of Abu Simbel to the golden sarcophagus now resting in Cairo, Ramses's story is a bridge between ancient divinity and modern curiosity. He lived in a time when gods walked the earth and convinced the world he was one of them. He ruled longer than any other Egyptian pharaoh. He fought great wars, forged enduring peace, loved deeply, and built monuments that defied the erosion of time. His reign was one of ambition, spirituality, and theatrical brilliance. Even in modern times, Ramses' life raises questions. How did one man shape a civilization's image for eternity? How did a single reign become a template for kingly greatness? Perhaps it is because Ramses understood the power of story, of symbol, of stone. He carved his name into the very bones of the earth. And as long as we remember him, as long as someone speaks his name, Ramses the Great truly remains immortal. Ramses II understood that memory could be shaped through stone. While temples glorified the gods and palaces hosted the living, it was tombs and inscriptions that ensured immortality. To that end, he commissioned more inscriptions and monuments than any pharaoh before him. His name engraved on every wall, obelisk, and column that bore witness to Egypt's greatness. Ramses was a master of visual messaging. At Luxor, Karnak, and the Ramesseum, he inserted his name into older monuments, aligning himself with past dynasties to project timelessness. He even claimed structures built by others, replacing their inscriptions with his own. Every carving, relief, and obelisk told a curated version of his story. Victorious in war, beloved by the gods, and adored by his people. His battle scenes always showed triumph, even when outcomes were uncertain. His temples depicted him at divine scale, towering above enemies and mortals alike. He also innovated. His architects created multi-level sanctuaries, hypostyle halls with massive lotus-topped columns, and corridors that directed sunlight to hit sacred statues at precise moments. These structures were more than artistry. They were legacy machines. Ramses knew that kingdoms could fall, but stone would speak across millennia. And so Egypt became his canvas, and history his chisel. Throughout his reign, Ramses II presided over grand religious festivals, events that not only honored the gods, but reaffirmed his divine status. These celebrations brought together all classes of Egyptian society, uniting them in devotion, spectacle, and joy. In addition to the said festival and Opet, Ramses introduced expanded celebrations of Ra, Ptah, and Ma'at. Each festival featured parades of sacred barks, ritual dancing, and public feasts. Gold-trimmed statues were carried through streets lined with flowers, while music filled the air, lyres, flutes, and sacred chants echoing from temple to temple. One of the most dazzling was the Feast of the Horizon, where thousands gathered at Abu Simbel to watch the sunrise illuminate the inner sanctum. It was believed that the gods themselves watched this event, reaffirming the pharaoh's favor in the cosmos. Citizens participated by bringing offerings, loaves of bread, lotus flowers, small idols. Nobles sponsored banquets, while children sang hymns in praise of Ramses. These festivals weren't merely rituals, they were performances of unity. In honoring the gods, the people also honored Ramses. And in every torchlight, every drumbeat, every shared prayer, Egypt celebrated both the divine and the mortal, who bridged the two. Behind every towering statue and painted tomb stood legions of artists whose hands shaped Ramses' vision. Unlike in modern times, these artists were not anonymous laborers. They were respected members of society, living in royal settlements and trained in sacred geometry, symbolism, and divine storytelling. Ramses deeply valued the arts. He personally commissioned painters, stonemasons, and sculptors, often visiting workshops to inspect their progress. Some reliefs even depict him blessing artists as they carve his likeness. To the pharaoh, their work was not only decoration, it was magic, binding memory to material. In the artisans' village of Deir el-Medina, life thrived. Families of craftsmen lived, worked, and worshipped together. Their homes were modest, but their purpose was sacred, to record the eternal life of their king and prepare for their own afterlives through faithful service. Under Ramses, artistic style flourished, grander, more detailed and expressive than previous eras. Figures were bold and lifelike. Colors were vivid. Stories were told in sweeping panels. Ramses in battle, Ramses with the gods, Ramses among his people. Their tools were simple, stone, copper, pigment, but their vision shaped eternity. And Ramses, ever the orchestrator of greatness, ensured that those who painted his glory became part of it. While Thebes and Nubia housed many grand monuments, Ramses II also turned his attention to Egypt's fertile Delta region. Here, near the capital Pi Ramesses, he ordered the construction of temples that rivaled those in the south. Not only for spiritual reasons, but to assert dominance near the empire's vulnerable frontiers. These temples were strategically located along trade routes, river junctions, and provincial hubs. Each was dedicated to a major deity, Amun, Ra Horakti, Ptah, and even Seth, god of storms and war, who was believed to protect Egypt's chaotic edges. The most famous was the Temple of Seth at Tanis, a sprawling complex built with stone imported from across the Nile Valley. Inscriptions glorified Ramses as beloved of Seth, aligning him with the forces of strength, chaos, and control. These Delta temples also served administrative roles. Royal edicts were announced here, taxes collected, and military musters conducted in adjacent plazas. They were spiritual fortresses as much as places of worship. Ramses's presence in the north was absolute. On Epes, his temples rose from marshy ground like mountains of power. Sisat Singapore, reminding everyone, ally and enemy alike, that Pharaoh's reach was as wide as the Nile itself. At the height of its power, Pi Ramesses was the beating heart of Egypt. More than a capital, it was a living monument, a testament to Ramses II's ambition, organization, and vision. With broad avenues, gleaming palaces, and massive stables for chariots, the city was unmatched in scale and splendor. Markets bustled with trade from across the empire. Incense from Punt, cedarwood from Lebanon, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Scribes tracked goods and tributes on scrolls, while soldiers drilled in organized ranks near royal barracks. Ramses held court in the Golden House, where foreign envoys came to kneel before his throne. In nearby schools, princes and princesses were educated in languages, astronomy, and politics. The city also boasted advanced infrastructure, irrigation canals, food granaries, and sophisticated sewage systems for its elite districts. Even as Ramses aged, Pi Ramesses remained vibrant. Festivals illuminated the streets with torches and music. Temples held dawn and dusk ceremonies, drawing crowds from nearby provinces. Though the city would later fall into ruin, its memory endured. In its time, Pi Ramesses was a jewel among ancient cities, a place where power, culture, and divinity coexisted under the shadow of one man's vision. A city forged by Pharaoh, for the gods and for eternity. In ancient Egypt, animals were not only sacred, they were divine manifestations. Ramses II honored this tradition passionately, dedicating entire temples and shrines to animal deities, and nurturing sanctuaries for their living symbols. Ipious bulls in Memphis, sacred falcons of Horus, and cats of Bastet were cared for in special enclosures. Osiers, fed luxuriously and buried with reverence upon death. Ramses regularly attended ceremonies where these animals were anointed, adorned, and paraded in gilded carts. In Pi Ramesses, crocodiles sacred to Sobek swam in protected pools, while ibis birds, symbolizing Thoth, nested in palace gardens. Ramses believed these creatures formed a spiritual bridge to the gods, and by honoring them, he kept divine favor firmly anchored in Egypt. The pharaoh even had his own beloved pets: hunting dogs, trained lions, and sacred cattle, some of whom were buried in decorated tombs near his palaces. Their names were recorded in stelae, a rare honor even among nobles. These practices weren't mere tradition, they reflected Ramses's understanding of cosmic balance. Animals were avatars of power, purity, and prophecy. To protect and revere them was to rule wisely and justly. In the company of beasts, Ramses found another path to eternity. Through nature itself, sacred and everlasting, long after his death, Ramses II transformed from man to myth. His name endured not only in stone but in stories, carried through generations, empires, and centuries. To later Egyptians, he was not just a great king. He was the king, the very archetype of pharaonic greatness. Legends said he conversed with gods, commanded storms, and fought entire armies single-handedly. Some claimed the sun paused to honor him, or that the Nile flowed wider in his reign. Even foreign rulers remembered him. The Greeks, centuries later, identified him as Ozymandias, the mighty king of kings whose legacy would inspire poets and prophets alike. Temples bearing his name were refurbished by later pharaohs as acts of devotion. In tombs, his image appeared in paintings centuries newer than his own. His influence on royal iconography persisted through the Ptolemies and even into Roman Egypt. Yet as myths grew, so did the gap between man and memory. His victories were exaggerated, his reign painted with divine light. Still, beneath the embellishment was truth. Ramses had left an indelible mark on the world. He was the pharaoh whose memory outlived empires, who became legend while still in life, and myth long after death. The ancient Egyptians believed the afterlife was not a dream, but a journey. For Ramses II, the voyage beyond death was prepared with the same care and grandeur that defined his reign. Through tomb paintings, funerary scrolls, and sacred texts, his passage through the underworld, Duat, was imagined in vivid detail. In the Book of Gates and Book of the Dead, Ramses is shown traversing caverns of fire, rivers of chaos, and halls guarded by serpents. He stands before the gods in judgment, his heart weighed against the feather of Ma'at. But Ramses does not falter. His virtues, victories, and vows guide him. He greets Osiris with reverence, is purified by Thoth, and is reborn alongside Ra as the sun god rises anew. Each symbol, each spell, was painted into his tomb as a roadmap, ensuring that the pharaoh would live forever, not just in name, but in spirit. For Ramses, the afterlife was not merely survival, it was promotion. In life, he had been divine. In death, he would become eternal. The stars above were his crown, the night sky his canopy. And so Ramses marched, centuries after Ramses' empire had crumbled, and sand had buried his monuments. The great temple of Abu Simbel slept beneath the desert. Forgotten by time, it lay hidden until Itzanbot by Isersan, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt stumbled upon a carved stone peeking from the earth. It wasn't until Ichenbar by Ishiti that Italian adventurer Giovanni Belzoni finally cleared enough sand to reveal the colossal statues of Ramses II. Towering and imposing, they had survived nearly sendling years. The world was stunned. Abu Simbel quickly became one of the most iconic archaeological sites on Earth. Artists, historians, and kings traveled to behold the grandeur. Ramses, once worshipped by priests, now commanded awe from scholars and explorers. Then, in the Ichen Jobite Lycosis, another miracle occurred. As the rising waters of the Aswan High Dam threatened to flood the site, a massive international effort was launched. Engineers carefully cut the entire temple complex into pieces and relocated it, stone by stone, to higher ground. It was a feat of modern preservation as monumental as Ramses' original construction. Through this rescue, Abu Simbel and its god-king were given a second life. The world had once again bowed to Ramses, not in fear or devotion, but in admiration and respect. And so, our journey returns to the heart of the desert, where colossal statues gaze across the Nile and whisper stories of a world long gone. Ramses II, builder, warrior, lover, god-king, has not faded. His echo travels through time, etched in stone, told in classrooms, filmed on screens, and dreamed by those who marvel at history. He ruled an empire of light and shadow. He made peace with rivals, carved mountains into monuments, and turned divine myth into royal reality. His was a life larger than life, a bridge between humanity and eternity. Today, Ramses' face still watches the sun rise over Egypt. His name is still spoken in dozens of languages. His legacy reminds us that greatness is not only about power, but about memory. It is not only what we do, but how we are remembered. Perhaps this is why, millennia later, we still stand in awe. For as the poet Shelley once wrote, Prodient, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kingsdrand, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. But Ramses, unlike that fallen statue, has not crumbled to dust. His works endure. His name still commands wonder. Ramses the Great was not just a pharaoh. He was history carved into the bones of the earth. Thank you, dear viewers, for joining us on this incredible journey through the life and legacy of Pharaoh Ramses II, one of the most powerful, visionary, and enduring figures in human history. From his divine coronation to the awe-inspiring temples of Abu Simbel, from legendary battles to timeless love stories, Ramses' reign stands as a towering monument to the ambition and spirit of ancient Egypt. As we've seen, he was more than just a king. He was a builder of nations, a symbol of cosmic balance, and a living god to his people. His fingerprints are still etched in stone across deserts and valleys, and his story continues to fascinate scholars and storytellers alike. We hope this documentary has not only educated you, but also sparked your imagination. History isn't just about dates and dynasties. It's about people, passion, and legacy. Ramses the Great reminds us that greatness isn't just achieved. It is carved, built, and remembered. If you enjoyed this series, please like, share, and subscribe for more epic historical journeys. And until next time, may the sun always shine upon your path. And may you carry a little piece of ancient wonder with you. Farewell from the land of pharaohs